Wisco Dice! Hey yo folks, I am your host, the Conesy with the Most, and I am joined today by...
Hey, I'm Suzanne, and today we have a special guest on the show. We have Dave Beck, who is the designer and publisher behind the widely popular game Distilled. He's here to talk to us about his new game, Luthier. So, welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself to listeners who have not had the pleasure of meeting you yet?
Sure. Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Cozy. Yeah, my name is Dave Beck. I am the owner of Paverson Games and the designer of Distilled and co-designer of the upcoming Luthier. Proud Wisconsin resident as well. Yeah, so excited to be on the podcast with y'all.
Yes, and we are so excited to have you. Those of you who have tuned into past podcasts and YouTube shows for Wisco Dice, you know we are huge fans of Distilled, and we have been getting so psyched about Luthier with seeing the previews as we've talked to you about. This has been coming up. So, do you want to just start us off by telling us a little bit about Luthier?
Yeah, happy to. So, Luthier is the follow-up to Distilled. It is a co-design between myself and Abe Burson. And this game is just like with Distilled, heavily involved with theme and mechanics and how they're intertwined. In this case, it's a little crunchier of a game. So I like to say Distilled's right around a 3 on the BGG scale. This is around 3.5, 3.75, so a little heavier. In this game, you are the head of a luthier family, an instrument-making family. And you are in the golden age of classical music where you are crafting different sorts of instruments for famous, historically accurate patrons in Western Europe. And you are trying to not only perform and repair these instruments, but also have them placed in a central orchestra, all while trying to climb different tracks, trying to gain different types of prestige points. And whoever has the most prestige at the end of the game is the winner.
That is definitely a new theme that we've not seen before.
Yeah.
I'm sure somewhere out there in the thousands of board games, maybe somebody's come up with this, but yeah, it's definitely a unique theme to board games, and one when it first announced, I was like, well, Distilled was really off the wall, a bit different from what everybody else kind of was doing theme-wise. Let's see what he can do with this. And the art looks great. The theme has got me captured. We got a good chance to get a great rundown of how Luthier mechanically is going to work last year at Gen Con, which was awesome. On top of this crunchier experience and how it's kind of come together, what's really unique? What makes Luthier the game that we all want to play?
Yeah, great question. So one thing I didn't mention in the overview is exactly what you're asking about. We have an interesting mechanic in the game that we call hidden bidding worker placement. It's not necessarily you bidding against each other in the traditional sense, but in this case, it is a worker placement game. Your workers are your family members. Because again, you're the head of this household. They're all working together in this workshop to craft different instruments. Well, each family member is represented by a disc. That disc has a number printed on the bottom side of it. So what that means is I've got a family that I begin the game with family members with skill levels of 1, 3, and 5, 5 being the best. And I'm going to send these family members out across the board to do different tasks. They might be trying to attract a new patron, or maybe make a performance, or perhaps on my own board where they are crafting instruments. Well, what happens is if the three of us decide we all want to gain a new instrument plan at the guild, maybe we all want a special violin that we want to be able to make, we'll send a worker there. Let's say I send a 1, and Conesy, you send a 3, and Suzanne actually sends a 5. When we go to resolve those workers in the next phase of the game, we flip them over and we look at those numbers and we see that Suzanne sent the highest worker value, the highest skill. Well, Suzanne jumps to the front of the line. She's going to be the one that snatches up that violin plan, which leaving Conesy and I kind of with our hands empty because we didn't prioritize this as much. But there's multiple things you can do at each location. So I could also take another card, or perhaps I could do an alternative action as well. In fact, if you send a high enough worker at a location like Suzanne did, you actually get to do a bonus action as well. So you really need to think about how you're going to prioritize where you want to prioritize your workers and send them, because there's actually 7 locations in the game that you can send them to, but obviously at the start of the game you only have 3 workers, so you really have to think about that. There's also a little bit of area control because we're all vying for first chairs in the orchestra in the center of the table. Those chairs are worth a lot of points at the end of the game. So some area control. There's a little bit of engine and tableau building because you are actually trying to fulfill these kind of orders for your patrons that are at your location. And if you're able to fulfill all of them, you get to kind of turn that patron into a lifelong patron that builds your engine as well. So lots and lots of different kind of mechanics that are intermingling, all while trying to be historically accurate and kind of true to the theme of the idea of crafting.
So that theme of crafting these instruments, and you sounds like you've done a lot of research with it to try and make it very accurate, which you did with Distilled. Every time we play Distilled and I teach it to new players, they get really excited about learning about how you distill spirits and what all goes into it. And that's about as exciting for some as playing the game. With uh, Luthier, is that going to be a similar experience for players?
Yes, it is. So, as you said, with Distilled, we did quite a lot of research into it. Quite a lot. That was not only me doing quite a lot of research, visiting distilleries, reading about the process, but also it had to do with me realizing I needed to hire someone who was a specialist in this area. So for Distilled, I hired Blake Turner, Dr. Inkwell, where he knows quite a lot about mixology, about cocktails, about spirits, and the history of that. And he actually ended up writing quite a lot of the flavor text for the game too, because of that. Well, we're doing the exact same thing with Luthier. Originally, when Abe actually created this game years ago, that's how that started, and I can talk about that a little bit more in detail later. It was set more in the modern day. We decided to bring this back to kind of the golden age of when the idea of crafting instruments, Stradivari and other instrument makers lived. And by doing that, I knew that that was an opportunity for us to make that same connection like with Distilled. I did quite a lot of research on this. I visited quite a lot of museums, and that's where I learned how many times you were making the instruments in this day and age, back in that golden age, for patrons. So, for instance, a famous violinist like Paganini would have an instrument made for him by a famous luthier. So we've done this here with Luthier as well, where we've got well over 20 different historical characters, actually 30 historical characters that each play different instruments or had been connected to music in some way. And then we also have 8 different instrument makers, luthiers as well as other instrument makers. A luthier is someone who crafts stringed instruments. In Luthier, we've expanded that to wind instruments, percussion, and keyboard as well. And on top of all of that, trying to be as historically accurate as possible, I've also hired a musicologist for the game. Kevin Yo is someone who has a doctorate or PhD in the history and in music in general, and has been really just a crucial aspect to this process to be able to not only help write the biographies for all of our characters, but also the history behind each instrument. And we're going to be sure to have that as far as flavor text in the game, in the rule book, as well as actually a full section in the rule book that's talking about all the different biographies and backgrounds of all these characters and these instruments. Now, one more thing to add on top of that too is that we've tried as best possible. Although for fans of Distilled, you know, a big part of that is the distillation process, taking the top and the bottom, the heads and the tails. It's not necessarily the exact same, of course, with crafting an instrument. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. But we have really tried to represent that by having a workbench the players work on where they're roughing instruments out first and then they're finishing the instruments, and they're using things like animal parts, because back then the strings were made from catgut, for instance, or the hide went into, of course, making a drum. So really tried to represent that through our resources that the players have in the game. Lots of the terminology and kind of the layout and the art, as you had mentioned, is an important part. Working with Vincent Dutrait on trying to be as authentic as possible in how we represent this stuff is important too.
Nice, nice. So I think you mentioned there that this game started with Abe creating this game years ago. You want to tell us a little bit about how Luthier came to be?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, yeah, so it's a really interesting story. Abe Burson, fantastic guy, great designer. He's come up with a couple different games, and this is, I think, going to be his first published game. I had an opportunity to playtest Luthier in January of 2020 at Protospiel, Minnesota. This is the very first time I had brought Distilled into the public, because this is before Distilled was published too. I was playtesting Distilled at this Protospiel meetup. A Protospiel is an opportunity for designers to bring their rough prototypes and get other designers and other people to play those games. So I was having Distilled playtested, and I got a chance to playtest Luthier. It was called Luthier. It had that great mechanic that Abe had come up with, that was hidden bidding, worker placement. It was, as I had said, it was set in the modern era, where you were essentially making different types of stringed instruments, guitars, violins, for people. So it really had some of those same elements to it. I would say it was probably around a 3, maybe a 2.75 to a 3 as far as complexity goes. I played it. I thought it was interesting. It was one of the more memorable games I had played at the time. But again, remember, my focus was entirely on Distilled at that point. I didn't even know. I knew I was going to maybe kickstart it, but I had no idea where it was going. At that time, I think it was definitely still a deck building game. It was a very different game. So we move on. A year later, we kickstart Distilled in summer of 2021. We deliver it in spring of 2023. Sometime, I think it was in 2022, I realized, and people had been asking, like, so what's Paverson Games' next game? And I remember thinking, like, I have no idea. I've been focusing everything on Distilled. All jokes aside, around that time, actually up until that time, every so often I was thinking about Luthier. It kept popping in my head. This game I had played back in 2020, January. And it was then that it clicked with me that this could be the next Paverson Games game. It's got an interesting theme. It's got an interesting mechanics. I reached out to Abe and I said, what do you think if Paverson Games publishes Luthier? And I would like to kind of take it and rip it down to its studs and redesign or add to the design so we could be essentially co-designers on this game. Abe said, yes, this sounds great. Abe had been working on it for, I think, about 10 years at that point. So he had really been working on it, but I don't think he had done much with it since January 2020 when I reached out to him. We got in touch. Last thing on this is I think this was happened after the fact. I was out in Scotland again, which is where I came up with Distilled in 2019. I was out in Scotland. I was touring a music museum. And it was at this music museum that I was walking around and I was looking at these beautiful harpsichords and these beautiful violins. And every single description said, made by such and such, like a famous historical crafter of instruments, for this patron. And that's when it clicked to me that, oh my gosh, there's a mechanic here in the game that I can play with, that an element that's not part of it right now, where you're making these for specific people who want specific things. And that's when it clicked in my head. This could be set in the golden age of classical music, where I could have everyone historical. I could have the patrons. They all give you gifts. Their patience wanes. If you can't make them happy, they're going to leave you. So it really started to play into this idea that that's what drove the future mechanics of the game. Performing with your instruments, repairing your instruments, craft your instruments, all centered around patrons and making them happy. Kind of that's where it grew. And I brought on Richard Woods, who was the developer for Distilled, and working with him, then we've kind of created what Luthier is today. A much crunchier game, bigger game as far as physical, takes up a lot of space on the table, but also such a beautiful game too, with the help of Vintage and Trade. So long answer to your question there, but it's got a really interesting history and evolution as a game, and the next one coming from Paverson Games.
So I think you mentioned Protospiel as well there. And for those who haven't been to a Protospiel, you don't have to be a designer or a publisher if there's a Protospiel in your area. And Suzanne and I have started going to Protospiel, at least here in Madison. We'd love to make some more, but it is an absolutely great time to in extremely low cost for everyone involved, and you get to play. You just keep playing games, and oftentimes you sit down to a table, and there's oftentimes a couple of different designers at that table, even, and you'll play one designer's game, and then they'll be like, hey, would you mind playing my game? Or maybe they have 2 or 3 games in their bag, and they'll be like, okay, well, this is the game I'm really trying to work on, but while you're here, you seem really cool. Here, I'll have you try this game. And so I really recommend for anyone, if they're look and see if there's a Protospiel near you, to go check them out, because it's a great way to help provide and influence these designers. And when there's great designs and you get to help have some of that feedback early into the creation process, and they turn into games that get published, it's a really awesome experience. So, and you never know, if you are a burgeoning designer or something yourself, you never know, you might be found by somebody like Dave here.
Yeah, good point.
Get your dream to become a reality, because in this space it is really hard to become a designer who's actually published.
Definitely is, and that's exactly right, Conesy. They're phenomenal. They're in most major cities. They're affordable, like you said. Many designers or publishers will frequent these as well, sometimes looking for games, sometimes just having their own games. So it's also a chance, like you mentioned, that you might get to play a game before it's going to be released a year or two in advance. So that's kind of fun to be in on that entry level, that ground level of giving feedback on shaping the future of that game as well.
So I think with Luthier, I don't know if we mentioned a player count. If we did, I didn't catch it. But how many players is Luthier gonna?
Yeah, so it supports 1 to 4 players. So, and the one is a fully dedicated solo mode. David Digby designed distilled solo mode, and we've brought him back. And actually, Richard Woods, our developer, has paired up with him. So they've co-designed the solo mode for Luthier with a game that is complex and worker placement and hidden bidding. We knew this was going to be quite a challenge to create a solo mode for that. I can confidently and happily say that they've created quite a crunchy, quite a cool kind of new, unique solo mode for Luthier. So I'm really excited for people to try that out.
Oh, I'm super excited to hear that. I like playing games solo as much as I like playing with other people. And I very much enjoyed, I've played, I think, Distilled solo about 2 or 3 times, and it's great. So to hear a fully dedicated solo mode
Yeah.
with these mechanics, I will definitely be playing it that way.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really interesting, and the system that they've come up with is quite impressive. And so we've invested a lot of time and energy into that, because we know there's a lot of people out there that enjoy solo, and it also, just quickly, Suzanne, because again, hidden bidding, worker placement. If you're playing as a 2-player game, same thing. Like, some people might want a little bit more tension, a little bit more busyness on the board to outbid each other. And so the beautiful part of this is that solo mode can be, that bot, if you will, can be used as a 3rd player.
Oh,
For
nice.
people playing a 2-player game, they have 2 choices. They can either play just head to head and that's it. It's a little bit less tense, right? Because there's all these spaces on the board. You might find yourself just going there on your own without anyone else to compete with. Or you add the bot as a 3rd player, and then it gets really tense. Then it's really tough. You never know where the bot's going. You've got to really think about how you're going to compete with the bot as well as the other player.
So that's a good way to scale a game like this.
Yeah.
And also to make it a little friendlier in a 2-player game, because then it's not me attacking Conesy
That's
and trying
true.
to get in his way. It's this bot,
That's
which,
right.
So
That's right.
I think that I know several people that will probably enjoy it when they play it 2 players with the bot. So
Yeah, we
You'll
hope
probably still attack me and do those things. However, you can figure out what my play style is, and then thoroughly trounce me at it. You'll like, oh yeah, I know he's definitely going over there, so I'm gonna make sure he can't get what he wants.
got to add challenges to the game for myself when I play against you. So, but maybe the bot will solve that, and I won't have to.
Yeah, because winning all the time isn't enough of a challenge for you.
Well, that's the one thing I've really enjoyed seeing players investigate or discover when they play Luthier, because since it's hidden bidding, using that same example I did before, where maybe the 3 of us go to the same location, and we all want that violin. And we know that Conesy really wants that violin. And actually, I don't really care that much about it, but I'm going to mess with his head. And I'm going to send a worker there. And Conesy thinks I really want that violin. But in reality, I sent a 1, knowing that I'm not going to get it, because my alternative maybe is to just get a free metal resource or a free couple animal resource, because every single location has 2 options you can choose. So you might think everybody's trying to nudge you out, but in reality, all they want is the resources there. But you don't know that until it's resolved. So that's become quite a fun element to the game that people like to play with, for sure.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So once the game is done, we have to pack it back up in the box.
Uh-huh.
Distilled came with a magnificent organizer in it, at least the copy
Yep.
we had.
Yep.
Are you doing something similar for Luthier?
Yes, so we are going to be doing a deluxe version of Luthier that will have a full trays this time. Although we don't have a bunch of spirit labels that we have to kind of keep organized, we do have lots of player components. So every player is going to have quite a lot of components, little different wood bits here and there that they're going to need to keep track of. So every single player is going to have their own dedicated storage system. And then, of course, other storage system for resources, cards, that type of thing, too. So we are going all out with themed inserts for Luthier. We are going to do a standard version, too, so that people that want a little bit more affordable version, there'll be that for them as well. That would be what you might find in retail. But yeah, Susan, we're doing a full-on deluxe insert, deluxe version of Luthier, which we're really excited about.
That is so exciting because that means I don't have to go and try and make an insert
That's right.
to have it all. Like, that's one of the best things is that it takes so much less time to set it up with
You're
using your
totally right.
inserts.
Yep, you're
So,
totally right.
oh, you made my day. And Conesy's over there rolling his eyes because he knows I love containers to organize things in.
Yeah. No, I mean, you do find organizers very important in board games, and it's amazing how much time versus jamming everything in baggies that having a good organizer can save you and set up and tear down when you have a game that has a lot of components that get put out all over the board or all over the table. I can't imagine trying to set up Distilled if I had to unpackage little baggies to get all the
Exactly.
components out. I'd probably just leave it on the shelf. The fact that I have a great organizer in the box means that the game, which is an awesome game and has made my top 10 of games all time, is a game that easily can get back to the table over and over.
Yep,
So
totally.
back to deluxe version, folks. Don't
Yeah.
worry, you want the organizers. So from a learn to play perspective, Distilled featured First Taste, which was absolutely brilliant. And honestly, the way I learned how to play Distilled, and I think everybody I've taught how to play it pretty much how to play Distilled. Is there going to be a learn to play similar to that experience in Luthier, or how are you approaching, because this is a crunchier game, how are you approaching new people learning this game?
Yeah. Yes, I'm glad you asked about that, Conesy. Yes. So First Taste was a separate rule book or separate booklet in Distilled. We are doing the exact same thing for Luthier. We're calling it the rehearsal. You will be guided through the first round of play, teaching you nearly the entire game in that first round, and then setting you free after that. So it has specific kind of setup. Each person, just like with Distilled, you'll start with certain specific Luthiers in this case and specific things. And the only difference here is it's a little bit more complex, of course, because of the hidden bidding. We need to make sure that I don't say, okay, if I'm the person running this, which is called the conductor, by the way, the conductor runs the rehearsal. If I'm running it, I shouldn't say, Conesy, put your number 3 worker face down over there. Because then everybody knows it's the number 3 worker. We want to be able to see that surprise. So what we've done is it would say, put your worker down in that location. Maybe it's the guild or the repair shop. And then you're going to have your own card. It's a backside of a reference card that is that player color, so blue or green or red. And it will tell you the number of the tokens. So it's like your own little cheat sheet to be able to do just for First Taste. So we're printing those just for for rehearsal, that we're doing that. And then the last fun thing that we're doing as part of the rehearsal is because the conductor is the person running the game, and because the game takes up a decent amount of table space, we felt it was very important to include a baton in the game. So there is a conductor's baton. It's a little punch out, cardboard punch out, that the conductor will be able to point to different locations on the board when they're doing those things. And we've already found that to be just a fun little thing that is very, very aligned with Paverson Games, where we like to add things that, who cares if it's not for gameplay? It's just fun to have this thing to add to the theme a little bit more. So you'll all backers or all owners of Luthier will be getting a baton, a cardboard punch-out baton in their game as well.
Nice.
Oh my gosh, that is so awesome. That's
Yeah.
not just nice. That's just awesome. I mean, how fun is it going to be to teach this game and have the baton and do that instead of saying, so and so, point to that spot right in front of you for me that I can't reach.
Exactly.
So,
And Suzanne, if you not so we're going to have multiple tiers, and I can get into a little bit of that here later if you want, but multiple backing pledge tiers, but one of the pledge tiers will include an actual baton that is branded Paverson Games, so you can have your own conductor's baton in the game as well.
Conesy, you need it back at that level.
Yeah. I mean, Dave, here's our money. Take it. You know, let's roll here. So, from a crowdfunding campaign, I believe you said this is, or we've gotten earlier from you that this is going to launch on July 16th.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Of course, folks, pay attention to WiscoDice.com because we'll be featuring this on Kickstart Monday when it's live, so you can get your news there. Of course, you can already go over to Kickstarter, and we'll have a link in the show notes for this episode where you can go over to Kickstarter and hit the little reminder button on this campaign. I think you got that out as well. I think because I clicked it the other day myself. I want to make sure I'm right there day one.
That's
within
right.
the first hour backing it, right?
Yep.
What can folks expect out of those various levels? You mentioned the levels. What are kind of the premier, the featured levels that you're going to have for people to back on this?
Yeah, great question. So with Distilled, it was our first campaign. We essentially had two levels, kind of a standard and then a deluxe level. Now, with Distilled, we only had one game. We did not have a standard game or a deluxe game, but what we did was we added more stuff into that deluxe pledge. Well, for Luthier, we are really trying to create different pledges for a variety of different economic needs or economic situations. So we are creating a standard pledge that is essentially if you were to find the game in the store, in the retail store, you would get the retail version of the game plus a promo pack that we're doing. Then the next step up is that deluxe game I was just talking about that really you'll never find in the store. You'll only find on our website or at cons or, of course, at the Kickstarter. You'll also never find it for this cheap. So we're significantly discounting all of our pledge tiers off of what you'd find in MSRP. So this is the chance for people to be able to essentially get this at the lowest price they'll ever see it. So that deluxe version is going to have metal coins already in the box. So you're already going to get metal coins with the game. You're going to get inserts, dual layer boards, lots and lots and lots of screen printed wood tokens too. So that's that deluxe tier or deluxe game. And then we're actually going to have two more pledges beyond that. One is going to allow you to upgrade all of the things in the deluxe game to its fullest potential. Realistic resources. We have something in the game called Inspiration, which is kind of like a wild currency, making those enamel metal. Upgraded worker chips, placement chips that are kind of like almost like iron clays to a certain degree, kind of a nice clicky clack feel. So some really cool upgrades there. And then we're doing an all-in, and the all-in is going to be crazy, and it's going to be up there as far as price. And it really is just for people that really want it all. That's not necessarily game stuff. It's kind of like I was talking about with the baton, like added stuff. Maybe there'll be a dice tower. Maybe there'll be a play mat. Maybe there'll be some other stuff in there too. Some fancy instrument tokens. So some other cool stuff that if people want to, and of course, mix and match. So we'll have everything as add-ons. So if someone says, well, I don't want that and that big one, but I do want that. Well, you'll totally be able to do that as well. So you can mix and match or make it easy and just do some different pledge levels as well. So really trying to hit it from both the kind of the basically standard, what you'd find in retail, all the way to just over the top, crazy, trick it out, all in pledge. And that promo pack will come for everybody. That's the last thing I'd want to mention there too. is that promo pack is going to be cards that the fans, the backers, are going to get to vote on. They're going to get to be the ones that recommend them, new instruments, new patrons. They get to recommend them and they get to vote on them, and that's what we were going to do in the game. So opportunity to have a little bit of fun during the campaign as well, because I'm not doing stretch goals, people. Believe it or not, I'm not going for stretch goals because I've already stretched everything way beyond my limit. But this is going to be a chance for us to all have some fun and come up with maybe some new instruments and patrons, people to be in the game as well.
I'll say
That's really
that
cool.
promo pack idea sounds better and more intriguing to me than stretch goals generally
Yeah,
are. Because
totally.
this will keep me active
Yeah,
and like checking back and wanting to keep talking about it. So
exactly. Yeah, we're excited.
I have enough stretch goals sitting in our library that we have never touched for games that
Yeah.
are probably great stretch goals, but with the amount of new games that keep coming in, we just end up not having time to replay that game that we backed as much as we thought we were. So,
Yeah.
not like the importance of having stretch goals to me it isn't very important.
Yeah.
But the idea of having a mechanism or a means in the campaign to keep the interest level up and keep people excited
Mm-hmm.
like this, I'm excited for it. Somebody looking at it from the outside in, I really think this is a great way to help keep that promotion active, keep people
Mm-hmm.
engaged with the Kickstarter, keep them talking about it while it goes through the crowdfunding
Yeah.
process. And this will be on Kickstarter. Like I said, it's the show. The link will be in the show notes. So you can get the reminder for that. Just head over to wiscodice.com. You'll be able to click that and get that particular item. Get that reminder. So moving on from the crowdfunding campaign and Luthier, there's this little show. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, called Gen Con in a little town called Indianapolis that's coming up here very soon, right at the beginning of August. We're going to be there. We know you're going to be there. What can folks expect to see out of Paverson Games while they're at the show?
Yeah, I love Gen Con. It is a wild, insane show. It sounds like it's going to be based on ticket sales, breaking records again for the largest ever here in the States. So what we'll be doing, we will have a booth. We are going to be in the way back. So when you need to go to the bathroom and you're feeling like you're walking around the exhibit hall and you're like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, come back and see Dave back in the Paverson Games booth, because that's likely where I am. I'm somewhere in the way back, but that's okay. I'm excited. We're going to have for sale, we're going to have most distilled products. We're sold out of a couple things, unfortunately, but we will have definitely the game. So we'll have the game for sale. We'll have the expansion. We'll have the new expansion, Cask Strength. This will be the first time in the U.S. that anyone's been able to obtain it at a con, so that'll be fun too. So those things we'll have. We don't have a very big booth, so we're not going to have a ton of stuff. So if you're listening to this and you want to be sure to grab something for this has to do with distilled, you'll definitely probably want to try and come back that first day you're there to grab it. That's especially goes for the base game, just because we don't have that much space in the booth. We'll have a decent amount of Cask Strength available, and we'll have a decent amount of some of those upgrades as well. So feel free to kind of come on out and visit us there. I'm looking right now. I'm trying to remember what I might have sold out. So we will not have the promo pack, the recipe cubes at Gen Con, because we are completely sold out of those actually in the entire world, but we will have pretty much everything else. I do want to side note mention quickly that anyone that is interested in anything distilled adjacent, we will have that as options in the Luthier campaign as well. And you'll get those before anyone else in the world gets them also. So if you did want the recipe cubes or the promo pack, you'll be able to back those in the Luthier campaign and get those delivered at the same time as Luthier stuff before it hits back to retail or anywhere else. The other thing I'll say is, of course, we'll have Luthier on display at our booth. We'll have Distilled on display at our booth. And then we will be running 9 games at the same time out in the game events area. They all sold out within the first couple days, unfortunately, but constantly throughout the entire con, we will have multiple games of Distilled going and Luthier. So you can stop by, sit down, watch a game being played in the events area as well. So lots and lots of stuff going on for Paverson Games. And you'll find us either by the front doors with the game event area or in the back by the bathrooms. So on either end of the expo floor, you'll find us with Luthier and Distilled.
There's no need to run to Dave's booth that first day. Do not run. Get behind that do not run chant as you're waving into the hall, because you can, correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, but they can go onto your website right now and order Distilled and get it delivered to their house.
Yep,
You
exactly.
don't need to run and panic or like, hey, I'm not going to be able to get a copy of this game.
That's right.
It's awesome if you get a copy of the game at the show, but if you don't, just click on over. We'll put a link in our show notes as well to where you can order it, so it's easy for you.
Yep.
And you can get a copy of Distilled.
Yep, exactly.
You can be like us, then take your copy of Distilled over to a distillery and play Distilled at a distillery.
That's right.
That was kind of a super awesome little thing we got to do very recently with it. So thank you, Wilden Distilling, for hosting a regular board game day.
So that was just really kind of crazy and exciting. That like nice experience to play it at a distillery.
Yeah, that's so neat.
And then having the distillery come and like look at the game and be like, yeah, that's what we do, and that all makes sense. So
nice.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'll also note that on the Wisco Dice front, I can almost guarantee we will have our copy of Distilled with us, and that at some point in the open gaming area over at JW Marriott, we will post on social media that we are set up for open gaming. Come game with us, just like we did last year. And some wonderful individuals will get to play Distilled with us and get to learn to play it, probably with all the expansions and all the bling. And if it worked out like it does last year and Dave's free, maybe he stops by.
Exactly.
That was a special treat for everyone that was playing with us last year. Was we got and all of a sudden I looked up and here's the whole Distilled team just standing there saying hi, and it was a great experience. And I don't know if everybody that was playing Distilled really realized it at the time, but I know it's Gen Con, but those kind of moments don't happen as much, for at least I haven't experienced at other shows, but they seem to happen, kind of those magical moments at Gen Con. So
totally.
Yeah. And I think when you were playing at Conesy, wasn't someone picking up the Dave Beck bottle?
I think that bottle was being purchased. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And I think I was hey, that is the designer of the game. That's the artwork for him. And then there he was.
The card up. There it is. There. I'm like a genie. I'm like, just rub that little card and then like I appear out of nowhere.
That would be an amazing trick.
Yeah.
So, is there anything
I don't know
else?
If I can pull it up again.
No,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. So besides promoting Distilled, Luthier, Paverson Games at Gen Con, is there anything else that you in general look forward to at Gen Con or excited about this year? Do you get time to do anything else?
Yeah, not really. Not too much time. It's kind of crazy. But I always love what you had said earlier. I love when people stop by and say hi to the booth. It's so fun to see people. It's like a mini reunion. So that's always fun. And then I also, sometimes when I get lucky enough to have some free time at night, I love going over to JW Marriott over there and playing some open gaming. That's a lot of fun too. This year, I think the thing I'm most nervous about and excited about is that I've been nominated, or Distilled's been nominated for a number of Dice Tower Awards. And so I'm going to be attending the Dice Tower Awards, and I don't expect to win anything, but it's going to be neat to just be there and be a finalist in some of these. So that's kind of exciting to think about. That a couple years ago it was just a prototype I had at a Protospiel in Minnesota, and now I'm sitting there either in a booth or at the Dice Tower Awards and being considered for stuff. So that's a pretty special thing that I'm looking forward to as well.
You're absolutely deserved to be there, and so is Distilled. It is, in my opinion, the absolute best game I played in 2023 that came out and was in people's hands. It made my top list, and we play a lot of games. And I know we don't play them all, but we do play a lot, and it made the top of my list. So that's absolutely awesome. Deserves to be there.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's exciting.
So what's next for Paverson Games after Luthier? Are you planning that far out, or are you Okay.
I am now. Once I realized that this is something that I really love to do is to work on games, design games, publish games. I've really tried to start thinking about what that future vision is going to be. So my hope is, knock on wood, my goal for Paverson Games is that we're going to start releasing / launching a game every single year. So 2021 was Distilled launch. 2024, here's Luthier's launch. We are hoping to launch something in 2025, and then from that, continue on with that as well. I can't really tell too much beyond the fact that we do have another expansion for Distilled in the plans down the road. So there's going to be at least one more for that. And then that we would be probably looking at launching at some point. And then we've signed a couple other games as well. So not me designing these, but other fantastic people designing them. Again, staying close to that idea of theme and mechanics being important and intertwined, thinking about art and components, authenticity and research as well, and how we represent that in the game. So you'll get more soon. We're not announcing anything yet, but probably in the next couple months we will be announcing some of those. So really excited about the future for Paverson Games and kind of thinking about not only expansions but also new IP as well.
Excited to see and hear more about those.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm excited for right now, just pumped for anything that you're developing. And yeah, so far they've, the one game has blown us away.
Yeah.
So we're
Thank you.
expecting similar going forward.
Thank you.
I remember talking to you that first time before the Distilled Kickstarter, and kind of that I don't know if it's how we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Kind of that first time, and listening to what you were talking about in the game and everything. Going, yeah, I think you've got a really good game here. It's definitely done way better than what I think anybody could have dreamed of.
Yep.
But it's really good. It's so much fun, and you feel so much like you're actually playing the game. And the more people discover it and are able to get their hands on it, the better.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
As long as that font size gets fixed.
Yeah. Oh, the second edition does. It's bigger. I know.
So, what also helped me was getting a better prescription in my glasses.
Yeah, see, I'm just helping you realize that you need to do your eye check. Is that what it is?
I'm now in the, having to do the bifocal one. So, I can read the cards so much better now too. But so do you want to remind the listeners as we're what the start and end dates for your Kickstarter campaign is? Because we know it starts the 16th, but
no problem. Yep. So launches July 16th, Tuesday morning, July 16th. It is going to end on Thursday, August 8th. I did that on purpose so that it overlaps with Gen Con. So if people are like, I want to see the game in person before I decide, it'll be there. You'll be able to see it and touch it and look at it and kind of learn more and talk to me about it, answer questions. So August 8th is when it ends. Thursday, August 8th. We are really looking at a much more accelerated timeline than Distilled. Distilled, we still had quite a lot to do, a lot of art, a lot of other stuff too. But with Luthier, we're actually fairly close. So we are actually hoping for a Q2, so sometime in the spring of 2025, we will deliver this to backers. So not too much longer to wait after the campaign is over. And so, the timeline is July 16th through August 8th. And of course, if someone misses it, they'll be able to do late pledges and that type of thing afterwards as well.
But try your best not to miss it.
That's right.
We're doing our part to try to help remind folks. That Kickstarter kicks off on July 16th. Make sure that you back it. If you're like us, you're going to make sure that you have plenty of credit card space free so that you can back at that all-in level. And we hope you nothing but the best, Dave. We are super excited for Luthier, and I'm going to be even more excited when it's in my hands and it's on my gaming table.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. And this has been a wonderful time talking with Dave over at Paverson Games. Make sure you head over to wiscodice.com to catch all of the links that we talked about in our show notes. And until next time, folks, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you leave a review of this show wherever your favorite place is to find podcasts. Oh, and by the way, give us a like on our Facebook page. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Pinterest while you're at it. If you haven't looked recently, make sure you catch up on the blog at wiscodice.com. Hey, Brian, what's that site?
Oh, darn, I forget. Justin, what's our website again?
Wiscodice.com.
That's right, it's wiscodice.com. And until next time, everyone, peace out.